Who wants some free, new and exclusive beers from one of the UK's best breweries? The good people at Beer52 and Siren Brewery have collaborated with 8 different breweries across the world to offer you 8 exclusive beers you won't find anywhere else. Simply go to www.beer52.com/Wisden and cover just £5.95 postage to receive your free case now. Beer52's industry experts carefully curate a new case every month, showcasing the very best craft beer and independent breweries from around the world. This month, they have teamed up with beer legend Siren to celebrate the brewery's 10th birthday. You can learn all about Siren's story and the fantastic breweries with whom they've collaborated in the award-winning Ferment magazine, which will also come free with your case of beers. On the beers themselves, I've tried a couple of them, and I'm especially a fan of the Pastel Pils. I'm a simple man, and sometimes you can't beat a crisp, clean, quaffable lager, and this ticks all the boxes. But if you've got a more refined palate than I have, you'll find plenty of stouts, IPAs, and the like to suit what you're after. And if dark beer isn't your thing, don't worry. Simply choose the light case and you'll be all set. You'll also get a couple of tasty snacks with whichever case you choose. Even if, after all that, you're still unsatisfied, you can simply pause or cancel at any time. So that's www.beer52.com/Wisden to claim your free case now. That's beer52.com/Wisden. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. England is set to pick an 18-man preliminary World Cup squad today and then name it later this week. To try and predict who they will choose and discuss everything else going on in the 100 and One Day Cup and everything else in the world this week, I'm joined by Phil Walker and Katya Witney. Phil.
Hello.
World Cup squad. Let's get the big one out of the way first. Ben Stokes. Matthew Mott, England's head coach, has told the Daily Mail that he wants Stokes back.
No, he's in. It's
yeah.
been confirmed now on Sky this morning. It's been confirmed. So yeah, he's back in the mix, back in the team.
Is that good? Should it be that simple? Is that the right decision for him and for England? Or is it just fine and we can move on?
Well, firstly, it hasn't really sent shockwaves through the cricketing world, has it? There was 2 ways of reading the Stokes story. One, that he was going to go under the knife to try and sort this knee problem out once and for all. The other is that he would be persuaded back into the setup to defend the World Cup. It's no great surprise that the latter course has been taken. I wonder what that says about his knee, whether his bowling days are done or whether there's talk that he won't play in the IPL. So perhaps post the India Test tour, they can have a few months, and even if that infringes on the start of the Test match summer next year, perhaps that's a window for his knee, or perhaps that's not going to happen now. Perhaps he's a batter only. Even if he is a batter only, then he gets into that squad and he gets into my team for all of the hoary old cliched reasons. When you're under the pump, when it's an arse nipper of a game, you need players who have the guts and gumption to pull it off. Nobody does it better than him. I know he's a bit slow to get going. He's not as explosive as he once was. Someone like Liam Livingstone would be immediate. His strike rate would perhaps be a couple of ticks higher than Stokes if he is going to bat in that sort of 5 or 6 slot. But in the end, you want Stokes under lights against 50,000, Brayan fans with pressure that wilts and diminishes most others. He grows into it, and I think we've seen it time and time again. The fact that he said yes is the key point to me, because not only does it show that he's up for it, but it also is a shot in the arm for the tournament itself. And the 50 over thing has become, it's been denigrated over the last few years in particular. And to have a tournament where a player who's still entirely comfortable deciding not to play in it would be a dent to the credibility of the tournament. So it's good for England as far as I can see, and it's certainly good for the tournament as well.
Should we? I think it's worth probably just breaking it down, because there'll be people who think a few different things, and some of those things are and aren't true. So I guess firstly, on the workload thing, he can just not play a game until the start of that tournament, and then he doesn't even have to play every game in that tournament. England had a very fixed 11 during the last World Cup, albeit with Moeen Ali dropping out and Roy getting injured, but they might well just rotate a bit more and feel that they'll have enough in the tank to get to semi-finals. That's one thing. He might only need to play 7 games of cricket between now and the India tour, which is that you think that would be all right. You can still get a lot of rest in that time. The other thing is, as Phil was saying on the injury, I read it's something called patellar tendonitis, which sometimes surgery can help, but often rest is the only thing. So actually, it is a bit more about just picking and choosing your cricket, I guess. But is there another angle in terms of the, you know, I know it hasn't been that long since he retired, but the players who have come in and done well, who will now, I suppose, be further down the queue because Stokes has put his hand up again? Or is it just, it's Ben Stokes and that's the caliber of player he is, that he gets to do things like that, I suppose?
Yeah, that's completely it. It's completely different from 2019, where Owen Morgan and the likes had spent years crafting this perfectly balanced ODI side with Stokes and Buttler in the opening partnership. And then there was debate over Jofra Archer coming in so close to the 2019 World Cup. But this year's not like that. They've been making do with whatever 11s they can cobble together pretty much in between the last World Cup and this one. And as Phil said, if you've got the opportunity for Stokes to come into your side, he has to come into it no matter what format it is. In a World Cup, in a knockout scenario, in every side in the world, he would be the first player on the team sheet. And as a batter, if you can't, well, we know he can't bowl, but you build that side around him. You build your side around your match winners, and Stokes is their biggest match winner. I guess the one that it's going to be hardest on is Dawid Malan, potentially, because you can see a scenario where they want to go with Stokes and Brook in the middle order as that combination. Personally, I wouldn't go that way. Personally, I would play Dawid Malan. I'm a big Dawid Malan fan in ODI cricket. But Dawid Malan is the one who's played in the most ODI cricket out of that middle order, outside of the established names who were there in 2019 pretty much. And he's done really well. Every time he's played ODI cricket for England over the last couple of years, he's been exceptional. I think he's averaged, since the beginning of last year, over 60 in ODI cricket. He's scored a ridiculous amount of centuries. And if he was to miss out because Stokes comes back in, then that would be really, really hard. But it's Ben Stokes, and that's the way it goes, unfortunately. It is hard, but when you've got a player like that comes around so infrequently, there are going to be good players who miss out and who don't get the gigs that they deserve to get because there is someone exceptional who's come along, and that's Ben Stokes in this scenario.
I think there's going to be more play on the bowling or lack of than is necessary as well. He never completed 10 overs in the World Cup 4 years ago, and that was pre-bad knee. That was with Stokes in his absolute physical prime. He only ever really averaged 4 or 5 overs a game if he bowled at all under Morgan. So you're not losing an integral part of a 6-man attack. You're losing perhaps a battering ram for certain moments across the 50 overs, but you're not really losing a key figure in that. If he does take the place of Malan, then there's more bowling options. But if he takes the place, say, of a Livingston, whose second, third spinner option would be quite useful on certain tracks in India in particular, and who is, for me, just as valuable a licorice all sorts kind of spinner as he is as a batter who comes off one in 3 or 4 in 50 over cricket. So you lose that side of things. But I don't think there needs to be that much concern really over Stokes. Will he bowl? Will he not? I don't really think that's that significant. What he does bring is this otherness, and Katya's right. The rules just don't apply to him. All of the... If anyone else had retired, then you shake hands on it. It doesn't matter who you are, really. You shake hands on it and you move on. Especially someone who is not in their physical peak and who's done it all before. But with him, it's different. It also just occurred to me this morning coming in, he didn't play in 2015, madly. He didn't play in that World Cup because he had a very bad, I think Sri Lanka batted 9. We were really shit hot back then. Batted 9, didn't really bowl. And he kept getting noughts in these non-event games in Sri Lanka. And so they didn't pick him in the World Cup. So he's only ever had one. And that would feel sort of cosmically wrong, wouldn't it? If Stokes, probably the most complete English cricketer for sure, if not not in the world across the last 7 or 8 years, if you were only to play in one 50 over World Cup, that would seem wrong somehow. So I'm delighted that he's back, and as I said earlier, it elevates the whole show.
It's a good one World Cup to have, though, isn't it? For sure. But in the end,
the juices have got flowing again for him, and the thought of going back to back and being there in the final of the T20 last year, obviously the 2019 finale, and he can just see it in the ether down there, and thankfully he's back. Wherever he bats in the side, and he's not going to be on the bench, right? wherever he bats in the side, it looks like a very, very strong top 6 or 7 now. Whether it's Milan who makes way or whether it's Livingston who makes way, it looks rock solid really, with Root 3, probably Brook 4, and then Stokes and Butler interchangeable perhaps at 5 or 6, do you think?
Possibly, or I think Stokes might just slot in at 4. You get Butler at 5, and then maybe Moeen or Livingston at 6. I think it is the bowling thing is...
Well, so no Brook? Well,
I think it's that thing that's worth talking about, because although Stokes would very rarely be bowling 10 overs, yes, it's also very rare you would just have those 5 bowlers bowl 10 overs. And okay, England do have Root, who maybe his bowling just comes more into it. He almost becomes... He's not the Ben Stokes in that side, but he is the guy who bowls 3 or 4 overs so that someone else only has to bowl 7 overs, so that only a couple can bowl 8 overs, and you can sort of get it a bit that way and give yourself a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe that is the way they'll go, but I think that's probably a key part of the discussion we'll come onto in predicting the squad, I guess. So should we get to that now?
Go for it.
Cool.
I mean, I don't have anything written down.
No, that's fine. I've got some notes.
Good lad.
We're expecting 18 names to be trimmed down to 15 with 3 backups by late September. So let's get that 15, and then let's add in who we think the 3 will be.
Sorry, hold on. So then whittling it down to an official 15 for the World Cup at the end of September, is that what you said?
They might do it earlier, but that's the final deadline.
Okay, so they can pick an 18, have 1 or 2 wild cards, and if they go really well in the early part of September in the ODIs, then they could slip in there.
And they'll also be able to bring 3 backups with them who they can bring into the squad in case of injury.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, whoever doesn't make the 15 from that 18 will likely be a backup.
You'd think, yeah, but there's always, that Liam Dawson is going to squeeze in, even if he's not in that 18, isn't he?
He'll get another winner's medal.
I figured the best place to start was with that 2019 World Cup squad. So the easy ones who are definitely going to be in there: Bairstow, Root, Butler, Rashid, Mark Wood, Wokes, Moeen Ali. Even though Moeen Ali was a bit peripheral in that 2019 event, he's come back into it. It's World Cup in India. He's going to be a key part this time around. Ben Stokes in there as well. So that's 8 names that we've got. Owen Morgan, Liam Plunkett are out, as almost certainly are Tom Curran and James Vince. That's 4 names we definitely have to fill.
You can add Sam Curran and Jason Roy as definites.
Well, I was going to ask you about Jason Roy, because he has had an up and down time of it since then, but he, at least in ODI cricket, is up at the moment. So you'd think he's just in there, right?
I think he's in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's in there. I think there's always a precariousness with Jason Roy because he plays so much on the edge, but then that's what makes him a match winner as well. I think he's in the side initially. They will need cover for him because he's mercurial, as we know. But I mean, he makes that 15 as it stands.
And Curran's he's been close to ever present, really, as much as anyone else for England since that last World Cup, and has been good. He's kind of quietly been good, but he's figuring out that role in ODI cricket.
Precisely, he knows how to bowl on Indian pitches as well. The line between 20 over cricket and 50 over cricket is more smudged than ever before, not least because we don't really play very much 50 over cricket anymore. So yeah, Sam Curran and Jason Roy, you can add to that 8. So that's a 10 guaranteed.
Yeah. And then Katya, the big one from that squad is Jofra Archer, who hasn't played since May. He is bowling again in practice, and Mott, in that same interview where he said, "I want Stokes in my team," has said that he would kind of be willing to have Archer play only some games in that tournament if it means that you have a chance of having Archer for the back end of that tournament because of the quality that he brings. Does that mean he's in, and is that fair enough, or is it too big a risk with a player who we've seen come back, get injured, and we've been around this a few times?
Oh, it's the hope, isn't it? It's just like you want him to play so much, no matter how little he plays. Because when he did come back in ODI cricket last year, he was really good, and it was like Jofra Archer's back again. But I don't know what the status of his fitness is. I don't think any of us know any time what the status of Jofra Archer's fitness really is. I'm not sure I'm picking a player who is unfit at the start of the tournament and then banking on their fitness going towards the end of the tournament. I'm not sure about that. But if you've got a chance of Jofra Archer, then you'd take it, really, wouldn't you? So it's a really difficult one. I think he'll probably be in the squad if there's any chance that he'll play. But yeah, I'm not really sure on that one. What do you think, Phil?
I don't like to talk about it. I said this before because we just don't know. And, if there was a medical expert with, intimate knowledge of his condition.
Then they say it was doctor patient confidentiality.
Sure, but you know what I mean. And I just think he's in an 18, even if he's not bowled a ball, and you shake hands on it and you put your arm around him if it doesn't happen after midway through September. But I think you give yourself every single chance with a player as unique as him. But the readiness or otherwise, we don't have a clue. We'll know a little bit more in 24 hours' time when that 18 is named, and I would be very surprised if he's not in it. Mm-hmm. If he's bowling in the nets, and we've seen footage on Twitter and so on, whatever the hell it's called these days, then he's in that squad. I'll be shocked if he's not, if he's standing upright and getting it down. There are one or two other interesting sort of wild card bowlers that would step in either in his place if he doesn't quite make it, or even alongside him, though, for sure.
Yeah, well, I guess let's get to those. And yeah, for me, Archer's in, and he even more than Stokes in a way. Like if Archer can't even play a game in that group stage, England would back themselves with a group of 14 to have enough to get through that. And then if he can play 2 games of cricket, then he's job for Archer.
Right, so, and it feels like there's different stages in his story, and perhaps the chapters that are now past can never be revisited, right? Those pages might be stuck together forever. But if you remember sort of 2 years ago, maybe 3 IPLs back now, he was going at literally 5.5 and over.
And for the worst team in the competition as well.
The worst team in the competition with 60-yard boundaries, 65-yard boundaries, and was unplayable. And so this notion that the pitches will neutralise what he offers has been proved in the past to be nonsense. And so given everything that he has and still will have somewhere, then he's in like Flynn, no question about it. Mm-hmm. And he offers something that no other English bowler has. Sure, Mark Wood has absolute pace, but Archer from that slightly higher angle on those pitches as well, back of a length, he will be as important as any player out there, provided he can stand up. Mm. And we desperately hope that he can.
So that's 11 names. As I see it, I think we need one more quick, one more spin option, one more batter, and then you have a bit of a wild card in there. Should we start with? I mean, for me, the batter's the trickiest one. I wonder if that's where the wild card comes in, because we've already.
Let's come to that last. Do you mind?
Okay. Should we do the spin option first then? And
yeah.
Do you think is it just Liam Livingstone as we've discussed?
Katya?
I think so. I mean, there's obviously Will Jacks, but then he hasn't really been bowling that much over the summer, has he? Has he made his debut in ODI cricket yet? I can't remember. I don't think he has.
Jacks?
Yeah.
I can't picture him.
Maybe he was in Bangladesh. I can't remember.
But I mean, don't ever look at me for stuff like that.
Yeah. But I think Livingstone gets in over Jacks at the minute on experience and obviously knowing what he can do. You said Liam Dawson, there's an argument for Liam Dawson, but in terms of what England will want in their squad, I think they'll want that box of tricks, as Phil put it, that Liam Livingstone does offer. He offers more a different role with the bat than Liam Dawson as well. He offers that just complete, bomb or out kind of option, which I think they'll want kind of 7, 8, that kind, well not 8, 7 kind of position.
Rayan Ahmed, anyone?
No.
Too early?
It is too early, yeah. I mean, there's a world where he could have been in the conversation right now, but I don't think he is. Not over Liam Livingstone, basically, who is, as much as he hasn't quite set the world alight in ODI cricket as he has at times in T20 cricket, he is a proven experienced option.
Will Jacks might come into the conversation in a minute when it comes to the spare batter. But I think, if you're talking about the third spinner stroke hitter, then it's Livingstone.
Cool. So that's
who's living off that great year that he had. My word.
Yeah.
But anyway,
which you didn't see
when I went away for a month.
Yeah.
Came home and he's turned up on the front of my magazine.
If a batter makes runs and Phil isn't there to see it, that's what happened.
There's been many then.
Cool.
Right.
So that's 12. The pace option.
Right. So my shout is Reece Topley, hands down.
That's who we had in a predicted piece we did for the website.
Okay. Oh right. I thought I was being funky and progressive there. No, okay.
He's played a bit. He's really good.
Okay, so we know his record. If he's fit, he's good. He's been bowling well in the 100 from what I've seen. They like him. He also he doesn't seem twitchy in the big moments either. So I think he's he's a definite option. Who else? If not him, or if he breaks down?
So I mean, David Willey is a regular in most England squads, but I think, and he does have a really good record. He averages more in the bat in ODIs than Moeen Ali. I think that's still true. But you'd think you're going Topley over him as a sort of as a proper bowler. A couple of other guys who have played recently. Bryden Cars has played 9 ODIs in the last couple of years. Overton, Potts, Payne, Luke Wood, Chris Jordan have all played ODI cricket for England the last year or so. In another world, Sakib Mahmood would be this conversation, as with Ollie Stone, but I guess their injury has kept them out. I suppose the wild card,
Gus Atkinson.
Yeah.
He looked really quick here last week. Really quick.
Yeah. So I didn't see that, but it was 94s and 95s.
If the speed guns
so this
completely
is what I'm
out, but
asking you.
It looked
The eye test.
Yeah, it looked properly
Right.
quick. He's beating Butler. Was it Butler? Am I getting my teams mixed
Yeah,
up?
yeah,
He's beating Butler for pace. Looked properly quick. Looked really, really good. And I was talking to, I think Yaz wrote that piece about the predicted squad, and he said his squad would have looked a little bit different if he'd watched the game before, potentially with Gus.
Well, if Jofra doesn't make it, then he's the nearest like for like. Not that there is one, but he's the nearest imitation of him, right?
Mm-hmm.
From that height, genuine pace, bit of nip. So yeah, I can see that.
So I think I would have Topley ahead of Atkinson right now, but Atkinson would be at the head of the queue should any of those go
This
down
is real
injured.
hive mind stuff, isn't it? Somebody say something. Mark Elam.
It's worth saying as well, there's a few ODIs England have got before the World Cup, so there's time for them to try out a couple of players and also for people to show that they're not in form, and
Right,
people
sure.
to come in and replace them.
Sure.
So if Gus Atkinson comes in against, is it New Zealand who are coming, and does really well, and maybe Topley's not looking as good or someone else isn't looking as good, there's time for him to force his way into that squad still. But yeah, Gus Atkinson looked properly exciting here last week.
Okay.
There we go. So that's 13 now nailed on. So now we've got a batter and another player. And I guess we've mentioned a few batting options already to have mentioned.
So Milan is not in our 13 as it stands.
No, another is Harry Brook. We haven't actually put him down
Brooks
yet.
in.
So Brook's in.
We're going to disagree on this, aren't we?
What, you wouldn't have Brook in your team?
I wouldn't have Brook over Milan in the team.
There you go. There's your Mark Elam shout.
Explain.
Okay, so I've already said Dawid Malan has been exceptional in ODI cricket over the last year. He's not just cemented his place in England's side, he's cemented his place as one of the form ODI batters in the world over the last couple of years. I'm not disputing how good Brook is. I'm not going to even go there. Brook will cement himself in England's side in the next couple of years, but he hasn't done it yet. And purely on that basis, Milan gets in. I think if Milan plays, he will be one of the most important parts of England's batting lineup because he offers that stability and he also offers the ability to score quickly as well.
He makes hundreds as well.
He makes hundreds.
Like four different.
Yeah.
4 away hundreds or something like that, or 4 different opposition hundreds in the last 12, 18 months.
Yeah, 4 in the last 2 years, I think.
Right.
And some of those were really, really good hundreds as well. Like the one against Australia was a proper lone hand effort, and then makes one in Bangladesh to kind of answer some questions over his record in those conditions as well.
So as a number 4 batter, I would have Milan over Brook every time.
Interesting.
And then there's one name who we haven't even mentioned yet, who's Ben Duckett, who I think after that T20 series in Pakistan ahead of the T20 World Cup, and he wasn't that T20 World Cup squad, but people were saying, well, earmark him in for this World Cup squad coming up because of how well he played. How he played the spinners. And if there is a question mark over Harry Brook and Limas Dover's cricket that was exposed during the IPL, it was that work against spin, I suppose, even though he looked like a natural against it in Test cricket.
Okay. We're picking 2 more players, right?
Yes.
And one is the extra batter or additional batter, and the other one is what? What do we need here?
I think it can kind of be anything. Yeah. So we could go with Milan and Brook, but then I guess you're picking 2. Like when you pick someone like Livingston, say, who is in this squad already, but someone like Livingston, he fills a number of roles within that squad. That's not the case with Brook and Milan. But I guess maybe with the players we've got, we do have a lot of bases covered. You have 3 all-rounds.
But who else would we be picking if it wasn't Milan and Brook, really? So you're saying Duckett and, 1 or 2 other random outliers, a Vince or a Crawley or whatever, but realistically, they're not really in the conversation. So you're basically saying it's Brook and Milan, or what? Anyone
Duckett,
else?
Jax, yeah, maybe it's just Brook and Milan.
Jax is the other one, right? So Jax is a legitimate shout. It's a very legitimate shout. I can't cope with a 15 without Brook in it. I can understand why he might not make an 11, especially if Stokes isn't bowling and all the rest of it. I can see a way where he might not make it into that 11 all the time. But I discount the IPL with Brook. I sound like an old idiot, but the eye test for me is sufficient. I've seen enough cricket to know when a player is special and he's special. And if he doesn't quite crack it yet with the white ball, then he's only 5 minutes away from doing so. If I'm picking 3 from 4 of Livingston, Brook, Milan, Jax, and if I have to...
You just counting Duckett entirely in this?
Yeah, I'm not... I don't think Duckett quite makes it. Okay. I know that he's great against the spinners and so on and so on, but I think the strength of that batting lineup is just a tiny bit too established for him at this moment. If I'm picking 3 from those 4, Brook is a given. I think Milan's versatility, because he can open, he can bat 3, he can bat 4, I think it's a good shout. I think it's fair, and he deserves it as well. And he's consistently the bloke that always ends up seemingly looking in on the party. And so I can get with that for sure. And if I'm picking between Livingston and Jax, I would pick Jax. That's me personally. But I wouldn't discount Brook from that 15 in any way, shape or form. I can live without Livingston or Jax being in the side, and I'd probably lean by a nose towards Jax.
My point is that, like, in an ideal world, I would want both Milan and Brook in that squad. As you said, Brook is special, and I'm sure that he would find a way in the World Cup to come off. But it's a straight choice between Milan and Brook in that 15, which I think, were we doing a straight choice between Brook and Milan?
No, I think there would have been space for both if you just pick one of Jax or Livingston, I think.
Okay, cool. So one of Jax or Livingston. You're saying Jax, I'm saying Livingston. And then
I imagine Ben saying Livingston, right? And most people will be saying Livingston, and I can get that, and I can understand that. And they will be saying, well, no one else does what he can do at number 6 or 7 for a few balls. He can be 35 off 16. And he can. And he may well do that once or twice, for sure. I also think that Harry Brook could do that job, right? If Harry Brook is not in the top 4 of this side, but his features at 6, then he can do that job too. I also think that Moeen Ali is going to come off at that kind of strike rate just as regularly as Liam Livingston is. The bowling is interesting. He's a more interesting bowler than Will Jax, for sure. But Jax can open, right? So if Jason Roy doesn't get going, or if Bairstow's fitness is a concern, they're the 2 established openers as we stand, obviously, then Jax is a ready-made opener, as is Milan, in fairness. But Jax is a ready-made, explosive first 15 overs opener in a way that you could never put Livingston in that position. So I think there's more cover for Livingston's uniqueness, in air quotes, at 7 than there is for Jax. He's just a more versatile option for me.
But I think the point is England's batting order is so versatile. Like, you're talking about ready-made openers. I don't agree he should be in this position, but Joss Buttler can be an ODI opener. You know, there's so many different combinations you could go with to put this 11 on paper.
It's really good. It's good stuff when you go through it, right? This team is going to go a long way. You know, they can get turned over on the day, no doubt. But this is a good side if you're looking to try and defend the World Cup. A very good side. So,
are we leaving a slash then, or am I having the deciding? But
go on, you can go for it, Livingston.
Well, I mean, I think they will go with Livingston. Personally, I think that's what England will do. I can see what you're saying, Phil, but I guess it is... I think this player you're picking weirdly, even though they're both stronger batters than they are bowlers, I think you're picking this player more for their bowling. They're an all-rounder. And given how strong England's top 5, 6 is, the bowling is the more important aspect of that. And even if Jax is off spin, you know, test match 6 for... I still think Livingston's bag of tricks, especially because he can turn the ball a different way to... Moeen, I suppose Jackson, Moeen, you've got 2 bowlers doing very similar roles then. So I think that is probably just about what edges Livingston out.
Okay.
And then are we going with Jax, Atkinson, Duckett as our 3 reserves then? given that they're the guys we've talked about who haven't made it in?
Jacks, Atkinson, Duckett, did you say?
Yeah.
That sounds okay to me. So you have 2 frontline spinners and Livingston as your third. No one else. Dawson doesn't make the 18.
Yeah, well, Dawson could make the 18 over Jacks, possibly. He is more of a... I mean, he's just very World Cup reserve, isn't he? But he is exactly the guy that can come in. If Moeen gets injured, Dawson comes in. If Livingston gets injured...
Sure.
Even Rashid, actually, then you have the guy who turns the ball the other way a lot. So
I'm comfortable with those 3. With Duckett, Atkinson, and whichever the third one you said.
Will Jacks.
And Jacks.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that. And if Livingston gets the nod ahead of Jacks, which I'm pretty sure will happen anyway, as you say, then I'm okay with that.
Katya, all good?
Yep, all good.
Good, sorted. England selectors no longer need to meet
There we
this
go.
afternoon.
So have we just spent half hour basically picking the team that they're going to pick anyway?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, it shows we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess so.
Good. Well,
Any concerns with any of it? There's been so little cricket played, or is it all just so interchangeable now that it doesn't really matter?
well, I guess you could. Jason Roy will still be a slight concern. You know, his form is not what it was in 2019, and these aren't the conditions where he is absolutely at his best. Joe Root has not played a huge amount of ODI cricket in that time as well. Bear Stowe obviously came back into form at the end of the Ashes, but there are still those issues over his leg. But I guess you're looking at that team, and you're saying that in some ways it's actually more similar than the team in 2019 than we expected at the end of 2019.
Yeah, I was thinking that when we were going through it.
But maybe you're looking at some of them thinking like there are a few more questions over them as individuals than there were back then. That would be the question, I suppose. But it still looks pretty formidable, and they'll be among the favourites.
This is not relevant to the 15 or even the 18, but it's only a matter of time before Zach Crawley starts playing white ball cricket for England. I think the skill set that he has is perfectly suited to 50 over white ball cricket and possibly 20 over. What's lacking is the experience of the format. But if you look at hitting good balls for 4 as being a fundamental requirement for a white ball opening bat and hitting it clean through an infield where you can only have 2 men back, and also crucially, once 7 or 8 overs are in, you can play outside off stump, you can miss it, you can edge it because there's only going to be one slip if you're lucky, or if you're unlucky anyway. His skill set is perfect for white ball cricket. And so it's too early for him now, but it's only a matter of time.
One name we haven't mentioned is Phil Salt as well, but I don't think he quite gets in either.
I don't think he's quite there just yet. He's very good keeper bat as well, but there's so many options in that slot as it stands. So yeah. I don't think he quite gets the nod. So
would you be tempted by Crawley over Duckett in the preliminary? As in give him 3 games against New Zealand, see if he comes off, and then there's a question? Or do you think it's still just a tiny bit too early and he gets in that
I think there's too many options as it stands.
Yeah.
But Jason Roy is, 33, 34. Bear Stowe is similar kind of age, I would say. I don't want to do them down here, but they're in their early 30s, the two of them. And so I think Crawley's time is nigh. It's just not quite now.
Cool.
I think what's interesting for me about this World Cup squad as opposed to 2019 is it felt like that World Cup squad was 4 years in the making, and it took that for them to win the World Cup. Whereas now they're slotting people in, they're slotting people out, they're making up the team, and it still feels like it's a team that could win the World Cup, if that makes sense. I mean, it's partly like how ODI cricket has changed, but it's also the point that I think England have got to with their development of there's so many people that can come in and out, slot into the team, and perform and, you know, take them all the way, that it just feels so different from a team that was so thought out as opposed to this one that's kind of put together, you know, in a week.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what it indicates as well is the sort of the strength in white ball depth in English cricket is testament to the number of players who play it professionally, and how this sort of slightly eccentric and slightly dysfunctional system that we have, nonetheless, with that change in emphasis, driven by players as much as governing bodies over the last 6, 7, 8 years, is now bearing constant fruit. And you're never going to get to a point where you don't have an intriguing top 6 to choose from. You're never going to get to a point where you don't have really good white ball seamers. The only question mark as ever with English cricket is when Adil and Moeen jack it in, who is a world-class finger spinner, wrist spinner after those two? That's the only question. But then that's the ongoing question that we always face, regardless of the ball, regardless of the format. But the fact that we have 450 odd professional cricketers, many of whom as young players are now looking at white ball cricket first and foremost, means that the conveyor belt will be never ending from here on in. And, you know, we'll sit here in a year and we'll talk about Will Smead and we'll talk about Banton and we'll talk about people whose names we've literally never heard of. Players who are 16, 17 and already doing mad things in white ball cricket for their clubs and their counties. So it will just never stop from here on in.
Yeah. Well, on to the 100. And I spoke to Mark Butcher, who has been all around the country watching the competition unfold in the past week. Hi, Mark. We haven't really talked about the 100 at all yet on the podcast. I suppose it's not really a competition anyone has any strong feelings about. Should we start with the actual cricket?
Was that complete irony or just a smidge of it?
A fair dollop. But let's start with the actual cricket, I guess. It feels like a long time ago now, but last week here at the Oval was the Spencer Johnson and Gus Atkinson show. And it was pretty incredible, really. I mean, you've got two bowlers passing 90, one of them taking 3 wickets for 1 run, and neither of them are kind of anywhere close to household names. This is kind of what the 100 is or should be about, right?
Yeah, I mean, the compressing of the best talent around in the country, for me, it was always a good thing. And you can go back to the 90s in Cricketer and Wisden magazines and hear me sort of suggesting similar things. I mean, things were very different back in those days, obviously, because the Australians are kind of battering us from pillar to post all of the time, and we were looking for solutions to kind of like how to make our cricket better, how to make our cricketers better at the time. Whereas this has come at a completely different time and from a completely different angle. But what it has done is meant that you know, if you do have there are lots of quick bowlers knocking around in the English game at the moment. I mean, George Grimshaw was running on drinks yesterday for Welsh Fire. You know, you had John Turner, 22 years of age, bowling rapid last night with, you know, the 2 Pakistani overseas bowlers. We've had, you know, we've got Adam Milne in at the moment. Matt Henry is about to join with Lockie Ferguson, and there are also, you know, lots of other English hopefuls, and Gus Atkinson is clearly one of those. So you've got a lot better bowling stocks compressed into 8 different teams. Some of the pitches haven't been great, so the bowlers have had a bit more fun than perhaps they might do in regulation short form cricket. And the batters have had to work really hard. You know, guys that have made runs have had to struggle and work for them. Now, all of that, I'm not talking about the spectacle. I'm not talking about the competition itself. I'm not talking about 100 balls and all those types of things, because, you know, I mean, for me, that side of it has always been massively peripheral, the 100 balls thing. In fact, I don't really like it. I'll be honest. But when it comes to the actual cricket and cricketers playing against each other on show, you know, it's been of a pretty high standard, I think, this year.
And those two in particular, I mean, Spencer Johnson I guess where's he been? He's just been injured. But this time last year, he'd only played, I think, like 3 professional games. And Gus Atkinson, I guess, is the one England fans are excited about and want to hear about. How good is he? How good could he be? How far should he be tracked into playing everything all the time?
Yeah, everything all the time might not be a wise move. I mean, you know, the parallels with Jofra Archer and his bowling action are wildly similar. They really are. I mean, from the approach to the short delivery stride, the kind of the high arm action, the whole thing, they're almost identical. And so therefore you would imagine that the stresses on the body would occur in similar places, you know. So but I think, you know, England, as far as England are concerned, you've got the World Cup coming up now, and you've got the end of an era hoving into view, haven't you, with certain players who aren't going to make the next cycle on 50 over cricket. 50 over cricket has found itself in a difficult spot between the major tournaments, in terms of, you know, people either wanting to play it or people wanting to watch it. And so you would imagine that people like Atkinson, guys like Henry Brooks, who isn't even getting a game at the moment for Birmingham Phoenix, there are loads and loads of these young English quicks who will find themselves, you know, there's a tour to the West Indies coming up right off the back of the World Cup. It's pretty obvious that you're going to see a very different team go on that whiteboard trip than the one that has just played the World Cup. And so the cycle begins again, and there are lots and lots of players, lots more players than I think I can ever remember, sort of vying for recognition in England's 50 over and 20 over squads. And of course, that is only a good thing.
I guess the other standout performance of the week was Tammy Beaumont last night. The first 100 in the women's competition, the highest score in the men's or the women's competition. It feels amazing that a month and a half ago she wasn't in England's T20 side, and now she does something like that. It was pretty incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, fabulous, and very happy for her as well. She seems to have spent her entire career kind of being either told that she wasn't good enough at something and having to reprove it, or telling herself that she wasn't good enough at something and then having to dig deep within herself to prove herself wrong. And she's a fabulously talented player. And I don't blame England for having moved on from Tammy momentarily, simply because again the World Cups are a long way off in the distance, and she's no spring chicken anymore. And England do have as much in the men as they do in the women as well. They have some resources of younger players that it's worth investing the time in. But of course, her putting in performances like that then drives the others on to get better. So there is absolutely no downside whatsoever to Tammy Beaumont being in a position where she's not perhaps first pick in the T20 team, but actually driving the others on to push themselves ever harder. Otherwise, the veteran will come up and nick their spot. So it's fabulous. It was a really great afternoon at Welsh Fire. They had T-shirts printed very quickly afterwards that were on sale on the 100 shop within about an hour of her doing it. And it was pretty special. And they obviously go back to the top of the table as well, which, considering where they were or the whole franchise was last year, is something of a miracle.
Yeah, and actually on the competition itself, it's been incredibly close. I mean, in the men's, in kind of two different ways, I think. In the men's, just you look at the table and there's 1 point separating second and last. I mean, teams have played different numbers of games, but still, that's crazy just for right now. And then there's a bit more of a gap in the women's with Welsh Fire, Southern Brave and Northern Superchargers pulling away a bit. But I think that's where the close games have been, really. Like, you had that amazing finish between Welsh Fire and Birmingham Phoenix, with Shadam Ismail taking, a hat-trick with 4 needed to win off 3 balls. And then she kind of almost did it again 2 days later, I think, against Southern Brave. They won by 2 wickets at the last ball.
It would have done for not for a sort of like a freakish miss by the keeper that went for 4 byes. So yeah, I mean they've fought their way up there, and could be a long way away. If a couple of the close games, or one of the close games, that one against Southern Brave had gone their way, then they'd be way out in front. But yeah, I mean the men's, you've got 5 teams on 5 points. I'm just looking at the table now. Superchargers, Trent Rockets are in the top 3. Southern Brave, Manchester Originals, and Welsh Fire are all on 5 points underneath. And it's only Birmingham Phoenix, I think, are out of it. They're cooked. They've only got 3 games left, and the best they can do. I mean, if they won them all, they could end up on 10, I guess. So I mean, look, it's nobody's out of it quite yet in the men's comp. The weather's played its part in that, hasn't it? It's kind of kept things close with a lot of no results knocking around, but it should be quite a good finish in the last week or so. And again, of experience of watching IPLs and PSLs and various things like that, the worst thing you want is to kind of like to have the qualification stages decided with a week and a half to go, and that is not going to be the case in either men's or the women's.
How do you think the competition's been received this time around? Like, I can't work out if the Ashes has kind of helped or hindered it, if it feels a bit like people did the Ashes and then they're exhausted and they're a bit cricketed out, or if it has kind of kept the momentum going. And also you had obviously the damp early stage of the competition, which we're kind of coming out of now. How do you think it's kind of gone, I suppose, this year compared to the first 2?
I think it's gone okay. I think the weather's been the major factor, really. I still think that the crowds are very different, which is, again, if you look at what was set out to be achieved at the very beginning, rightly or wrongly, I think that has 100% been the case. That obviously you still get your diehard cricket fans who would watch anything and everything any day, and it's in the school holidays, etc. But certainly the proliferation of youngsters and adults taking the youngsters who might not otherwise have gone and seen a professional cricket match has been very noticeable on the grounds. And I think the weather has been the defining factor. Really, it's just been rubbish, and it keeps people away. It even keeps people away who bought tickets. So that's something. If by the looks of it, we're going to get quite a decent sort of last 2 weeks of the comp, which might well prove to be good. And you add that to the fact that the tables are very close, and we could see some really good crowds for those last 3-4 games each that the franchises have.
Yeah, and then away from the 100, there's 2 big England stories to get you on. One which broke just as we started recording. First, Ben Stokes, who it looks like is going to come out of retirement for the World Cup. Are you surprised at all? And is it a good thing that he is coming back, do you think, for him and for England?
Not surprised at all. And I think, I think we even called it after the minute he retired that retired was that, the reasons given were for workload. England haven't played a massive amount of 50 over cricket between the time he retired and now. But I think sort of keeping the mind space clear and not having to worry about that would have done as much as anything. And absolutely no shock whatsoever that England have decided to ask him to come back and play in the tournament. I mean, he's the man, isn't he, when it comes to these big games, these knockout tournaments, and putting in huge performances when the team needs them most. And if he's willing to play, why wouldn't they have him? I mean, he probably wouldn't be as an all-rounder, given what we've seen, but having him around in that dressing room, being able to plug him in the tight moments, in the big games, in the knockout stages, will be absolutely invaluable to Josh Buttler. So no surprise whatsoever there.
Yeah, is it too simplistic to think? Because some England fans being like, well, why isn't he just getting himself completely fit for, India and then Test cricket coming up? But bodies don't really work that way, do they? That you can just not do anything with them for 6 months and then they're fine again. That doesn't seem like that would work. I don't know.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what the issue is and why sort of like surgery is not wouldn't be the answer. I mean, because obviously then you'd say, well, okay, we'll get the op done, do your rehab, and the problem goes away. By the sounds of it, it's a chronic problem that won't go away even with that. And so it becomes a case of picking and choosing what the most important things are to be involved in. And the 50 over World Cup is, despite everything else, is still hugely important.
Yeah, fair enough. And then the other news, I don't know if you actually saw this, but have you seen that Zimbabwe are playing a test in England in 2025? We don't know the venue yet, but that's just good news, isn't it? And a nice reward for a good Zimbabwe team, and it's been far too long.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, all good. 2025. Where should they go?
Yeah, that's true. Get a Northern Test in there, or
a Northern Test in May. That'll help them out. No, it's just good news. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, right. Thanks very much for your time, Butch, and talk to you next week. Phil, Katya, we are doing a live show. It's on September the 7th at the Passage in London. We'll all be there, as well as Ollie Robinson, Mark Butcher, Yaz Rana will be back in the hosting chair.
Joe Harmon's away.
Yeah, but we'll get him involved somehow, I reckon.
Some sort of video link, Wizard of Oz style?
I was thinking life-size cutout.
Well, yeah.
Lovely.
Interesting you said Wizard of Oz style. I was thinking Scarecrow maybe with a Scare Joe possibly.
Nice.
With a face pinned up in him. Yeah.
Okay.
Could be anything like that. But it's going to be
it's a great
good
shame
fun,
he's
isn't
not
it?
with us, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's by the by.
Advert for the live show. Here's the guy who won't be there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's happening at the Passage charity, which is a charity for people experiencing homelessness in central London, in Victoria. So just up the road from the Oval here, where we are. And it's a marvellous charity that Joe and me volunteer for a bit, and my wife works there, and we're getting this event up and running. And it's honestly, folks, if you are vaguely in the vicinity, if you've got access to London, come along, because it will be an absolute scream. And there's food and there's drink and there's good times, provided we can deliver a half decent show. It's going to be a curry, apparently, Ben.
Yeah, a curry meal and a wine reception.
So you got your chicken option, you got your veggie option.
Okay, there you go.
And you got your rices and your breads.
Yeah, tickets are £45. So when you consider all of that, it's a pretty good deal. I think
you mentioned that you get a glass of wine or two in there as well.
Yeah, drink reception before, glass of wine reception before the event all kicks off. Other drinks available with a bit of an added fee, but that's still a good deal, I think. Katya, will this be your stage debut, or is there an amateur dramatics hobby we're not aware of?
I was second wise man in my school nativity play when I was a kid, but apart from that, it is my first on-stage outing. Yeah.
Superb.
Okay, well, we've got three wise men right here, haven't we?
Something like that. You don't want to know about my turn as Oedipus then in A-level?
Well, I just know you're guaranteed to have done loads on mic, on camera, on everything. But yeah, tell me about Oedipus. Oedipus Rex.
It was pretty strong. Standard legendary moments.
How did you do the blood from the eyes?
I had a bandage on and some red dye, and just before I went on, I could pierce it, and they started draining through the bandage onto my face. My sister, who was about 6 years younger than me, she played my daughter in it, Antigone, which was a walk-on role. And she was only given the gig that morning. And so she hadn't done any rehearsals. And she saw me walk on with the blood in the eyes. And she burst into tears. So you had my mum and dad, who were estranged, by the way. So they were watching, slightly weird in the first place. And then to see their daughter playing my daughter about a story of me shagging my mum and killing my father, the four of us all watching it together with my sister crying her eyes out, that was a showstopper.
Yeah, we might need to get some sort of psychoanalyst at the live show to try and unpack all that, I think.
Well, one thing I can say, my mum and dad won't be there.
Well,
you didn't see that coming, did you?
No, that's exactly what I was hoping for. This is just a little taster of what's to come. What else there? There's a little interval where you can meet us and the other guests. It's the first time we've kind of properly done one of these. We've dabbled in live stuff before, but this is going to be the first. This is going to be the best one we've done so far.
We did some screamers for the World Cup last time around at the Royal Garden Hotel, which often brought us no more than 6 or 7, like American tourists.
Yeah,
and
whereas
Joe, me and Niall O'Brien just standing there going, yeah, let's have a chat about the cricket.
This time we really need people to come so that so that they can let us do more of these. So please,
it's worth pointing out, Ben, that you mentioned it. People mentioned it on the podcast last week. Already, a number of tickets have gone. Right,
yes.
A good significant chunk. About half of the tickets already gone, and we haven't really social media'd it properly. So genuinely, if you are up for it, you're gonna have to move quickly because there's limited numbers, and it will sell out. And I know people say that, but this one will. Right. So if you fancy it, please do get a move on, and it'd be great to have you with us.
Yes, and the link to get tickets will be in the description of wherever you're listening to this podcast. So just go there, and you'll be able to get those. On to the Metro Bank One Day Cup. How much have either been following this week? I presume not a huge amount.
I've watched one Essex game.
Okay, there's been
apologies. Oh no, I watched some of the Prithvi nonsense.
Yes, well we'll get onto that. The thing is, there has been some really good, high quality, close finishes. There was I think the pick for me was between Notts and Surrey, so Notts went into the last 34 balls, needing 33 runs to win with 6 wickets in hand, and then the last 24 balls, needing 20 runs to win with 5 wickets in hand, and managed somehow to lose it. The last over, which they went into needing 6 from 6, again with still 3 wickets in hand at this point, went single, so at this point it's 4 from 4, and then 3 wickets and no runs from the last 4 balls by Dan Moriarty. So that was a brilliant finish, really exciting cricket. The Prithvi Shaw innings you mentioned came in perhaps some of the less competitive cricket that's been played in the English county scene, which was so Shaw gets a double that week, that day, ends up inside the top 10 scores in list day history. He's got 2 of those now. So he's
got 2 doubles.
Not just 2 doubles, 2 of the top 10 highest scores ever in list day cricket. The next game, not quite as bad for Somerset, but Cheshire Pujara hits 100. They win that. The next game after that, James Bracey.
Yeah, so he made a double as
century, well. Yeah, in a total of 450, which is inside the top 10 highest team scores, I think, in list A cricket ever. Somerset are missing 10 players to the 100, as their captain pointed out afterwards. They've got 17-year-old James Langridge, I think, went for nearly 12 and over in the Gloucestershire game. Ned Leonard went for 0 for 78, I think, either side of being left out of the Sussex game. Didn't bowl a full quota either time. It's just not ideal, is it, Phil? But I don't know what solution there is to counties who just get ransacked by the 100 because they're really good at white ball cricket. I mean, Somerset T20 Blast champions. That's why they've lost so many players, and now they're getting spanked in this, basically.
Yeah, it is difficult, and there really isn't any smart solution to this as it stands. It's intractable. I think in time, the 50 over cup may well be shunted to the front of the season, but it doesn't solve the problem. of the vast majority of your playing force not playing cricket because the 100 dominates in August. All I would offer by way of some kind of consolation to put upon fans is invariably, while your own club, if it's successful, it's a victim of its own success. Somerset's a perfect example. But there's very few cricket fans out there who care about Somerset who don't also care about Leicestershire and Derbyshire and the 18 club model. Leicestershire are currently top of the league. In the other league, Northants are second behind Warwickshire, but they're joint second with Gloucester and Worcester. These are clubs that are financially impoverished compared to the rest. These clubs don't win very much generally, with exceptions of Northants and Leicester, obviously in the early part of the T20 story, but Gloucester haven't won anything in a long, long time, for example. They're all up the top. We saw it last year, or maybe even the year before, Glamorgan and Essex in the final. These are two clubs that don't have an enormous amount of money, and yet the 50 over cup is an opportunity to bring through players and to have the core of your team to help you win something. So it's not fair on Somerset, but it does have this accidental benefit, at least, of giving greater opportunities to teams that are perpetually struggling to survive in an increasingly squeezed 18 club system where the cream of the crop moves to the top. So while Surrey will look at their story, and they're seventh with 2 defeats from 4 and 1 rain off, but the flip side of Surrey's frustrations, probably that they don't have their first team out, is that it does help other clubs to develop other players and to bring through players that can have a little bit more success than they would have otherwise expected. So I'm not saying this justifies all ills, and it clearly feels uneasy when you have a second team bowler such as the lad you mentioned, the 17-year-old for Somerset, being spanked all over the place in a derby against Gloucester, and that's something feels wrong and the integrity of the tournament feels compromised. But I'm just trying to find crumbs of comfort, really. And from, say, my team's perspective, Essex, they're a young team, very, very young team. There's teenagers who probably aren't quite ready for it yet. But they pulled out an outrageous win against Middlesex with one of their young lads, Allison, third man, putting off an outrageous piece of fielding. And they beat a Middlesex side which looks stronger on paper than Essex did. And they beat them in a big game. And those kinds of experiences still have absolute value, even though the overall quality is not what it once was. And it obviously drives down the reputation of 50 over cricket. And the 50 over cup suffers as a consequence. But it wasn't like it was this bouncing baby before the 100 turned up either. And I've done various Lords one-day finals, and I've commentated on a couple as well even. And the days of sellouts at Lords and partisan crowds, they'd gone before the 100. The competition was lacking for a little bit of sparkle, and that was to do with the blast. And so the 100 has maybe drawn this brought it into perspective. But it was struggling for breath before that, in truth. That's a garbled answer to a question I don't even know that you asked me, but I don't know. It's not ideal, but I'm just trying to see how it survives, really.
Yeah, and I guess some of the counties are also doing really good work. These are normally not the counties who are also hosting 100 games, but like Worcestershire, for example, are getting really, really good crowds in because they're marketing this. They're saying, this is the height of summer, the weather's going to be really good. Come down and watch it, and there are thousands of people turning up for these, which is also
right.
So like, not that it's not as if they're working in tandem, but if you're a county who isn't getting your crowds affected by the 100 so much, then there is that opportunity there, and some counties are reaping the rewards of that, I suppose.
Yeah, and as ever, there's good and bad in all of it, but many county fans have lamented the loss of festival cricket, for example. Mm-hmm. But Kent have been playing at Beckenham a couple of times, and they are taking their games around the country. And so if the 100 is immovable, and it certainly is until 2028, come what may, because of the TV deal, then you have to bring some cricket to the punters across August, right? You have to provide some cricket for people to watch who can't get to 100 games or for whom the 100 isn't for them. And so while the schedule feels chaotic and unbalanced, it's a better man than me to make it better. And there's a lot of people who line up on TV and slag it off, and I can understand why. And people write in and people get online and so on. But it's a devilishly difficult job. If the 100 has been seen to be necessary, and we can argue that till the cows come home, but we know the arguments for and against that thing, that is immovable. And if people have got problems with it, go and speak to the TV executives that actually control the game or partially control the game. So that's there. So what do you do for the fans? You have to put some cricket on.
Well, that's the thing, because so that what even are there even other options? I mean, if you were to play something that isn't county cricket, that's say like regional first-class cricket, like a north, south, east, west game, then you actually have county fans who like watching Somerset play not getting anything in August. And then what else could you play? So if you play the county championship alongside it, that's something you would even less like to denigrate, I suppose. So this is, as much as you feel for Somerset and for Essex as well, as you mentioned, who also have lost a lot of players, it's kind of the best solution you can go for, is it? Do you think?
Yeah, well, like Phil said, there isn't a perfect solution. There just isn't one. And it takes a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, but to actually put that schedule on paper and go, this is what we're doing, you're taking a huge risk because people aren't going to be happy with it, whatever you do. Rightly, in a lot of cases, not being happy with it. But we're saying, I know Somerset and Essex are depleted, and it will be really difficult for the home fans that are watching them. But there is some real quality cricketers on display as well that you can go see, like Prithvi Shaw being at Northants. That's insane for people at Northants to go and watch.
But it's objectively so, isn't it? If there were 4 or 5 other equivalents, but this is just this bizarre beacon.
I know, but it's like you said, trying to find some silver linings in it, that you do have the option of going to watch a Prithvi Shaw. You do have the option of, I know Pujara does the county championship as well, but while the 100 is taking away the headlines, you can go and watch Pujara be really good in 50 over cricket as well.
Yeah.
So there is stuff to look for that is a silver lining. And in a world where you are going to have to accommodate both the 100 and the county game, you have to look for the positives. Criticise where it's necessary to criticise, absolutely. But you also need to look for the positives and not say this is completely, absolutely the worst thing that could have happened, because there has to be a way of accommodating both. I don't know whether the current way is the right way of doing it. I can see arguments for moving the One Day Cup right to the beginning of the season or right to the end of the season. I can see arguments for all kinds of schedules, but this is the one we've got at the minute, basically, and that's how it's going.
I don't know how this works, and it's only just occurred to me, it might be bollocks, but potentially you could have a limit to how many players are taken from each county for the 100. I don't know how that would work logistically, or if it would be fair on the individuals. It might even, the more I say this out loud, the less valid it is. It would potentially impact on which clubs players decided to go to, if it were to impact on their chances of playing in the 100. But it would help here. It would help level the playing field here, if nothing else. Surrey have probably lost 11, 12 players to the 100.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think there's another layer of counties that don't host 100 sides as well, losing a ridiculous amount of players to the 100, like Somerset don't host the 100 side, and they've lost loads of players to it. So
that feels doubly harsh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably scrap that idea.
Okay. That's good.
But keep it in, because you can all laugh at me.
Yeah. Have you always dreamed of experiencing your bucket list cricket event? Watching an unmissable match in person, partaking in the roaring crowd, and cheering on your favourite team? Now is your chance to experience this with Gulliver's Sports Travel. As the UK's leading and longest established sports tour operator, Gulliver's extensive knowledge and passion for sports tours and unbeatable service means you should expect a fantastic tour. Gulliver's packages can include everything needed, including guaranteed official tickets, accommodation, flights, transfers, exclusive events, tour merchandise, excursions, and more. To find out more, visit their website, gulliverstravel.co.uk, or call them on 01684 878 937. A few other bits of international cricket from around the world to run through. As the most important is the World Cup schedule changed, with the ICC changing the times and dates of 9 group stage games. That's exactly 1 in 6, less than 2 months out from the competition starting. Tickets will go on sale just over a month before the competition starts, which is plenty of time, isn't it, Phil, for people who are planning big trips and wanting to book hotels and all that sort of thing. A month, you do loads of stuff in a month, can't you?
It's contemptible. Simple as that. Total contempt for the fans. Shameful, really, but not unexpected. I mean, if you ever need further evidence of the toothlessness of the ICC, I mean, not even the most craven person in that embattled organisation would think that this is okay. But I think we know where the decisions are coming from in that. Yeah, and how can we expect to turn something into a real world festival when you are taking the piss out of the punters less than 2 months before the thing starts? Just staggering.
I get there is an argument to say, obviously India is an absolutely massive country, and trying to host a global event on that scale across the entire country pretty much is a massive logistical challenge, but there's no way it should still be being sorted out this close to the tournament. There's no justifying that.
Exactly. You imagine in any other sport of note, right? You imagine changing World Cup football of venues less than 2 months before it kicks off.
No.
It's just impossible, isn't it? And we want to amplify and elevate this game. And then you hear stuff like that and you think, my God, it's just eternally village, isn't it?
Yeah,
on a certain
it is.
Level.
I can see, looking at the reasoning for the change, I can understand the reasons for the change. It's why those reasons weren't taken into consideration before, when they were doing the original scheduling, like it's festivals and that kind of stuff. But when those are going to happen,
sure.
They don't change. So why wasn't that taken into consideration before? I guess you have so many people working on things like this. You would think that some of the best logistical brains would have been put on it.
Would check when Diwali is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also the original schedule was only 3 months ahead of the competition, which is already way too close. And Phil, you are right that the stadiums might well still be full because you can cramp.
No, I just whacked my knee under the table. You've got that little jutting out bit under the table. Yeah. Sorry, what? No, just the stadiums, that the crowd, the attendances will be good because that it's a country of 1 billion people, lots of whom like cricket a lot, and you'll be able to get them in. And if tickets aren't selling, you give away some free ones. But World Cups aren't just about full stadiums; it's how a whole country changes. You get fan camps being set up. You get people watching it on the big screen, the games that they aren't at, but they get to go and watch them in the stadiums. You get people experiencing the culture, and all of that is going to be missing because it's going to be so hard for travelling fans to go. And then also just one small thing about the changes might benefit India from a cricketing point of view as well, because on the last day of the group stages is now the only game being played is them against the Netherlands, which so they'll know exactly what they need
if they need a net run rate boost. Yeah, and weirdly that's clashing with Diwali, which they would normally not play on. So it's just interesting. That's how it's panned out. Other news: South Africa have named some squads. First call-ups in ODI and T20I cricket for Devold Brevis, which is exciting. Who knows if he could maybe break up to that World Cup squad? That's quite a big ODI squad, so that's unlikely at this stage. Keshav Maharaj has made a very quick recovery from an ACL injury, which is...
Is Harmer in the squad? Do you know?
He's not. These are white ball squads, I guess. And he is a very good white ball spinner, but they've... I think Maharaj is a huge boost for them to have back in.
Yeah.
And also it's nice that Bavuma's back in the T20I squad, having not even been picked up in the SA20 when he was the captain, then getting axed as captain, coming into the SA20 and doing well. That's just nice to see for a cricketer we're all rooting for, I think. Also on T20I cricket, West Indies beat India 3-2 in a series. The first time in 13 series India have been beaten, and also nice West Indies considering their first round loss in 2022.
Yeah, they needed it. Everything feels consolatory.
Yes.
But yeah, they needed it. Of course, notoriously, they won't be seen in India in a couple of months' time.
Yeah. And Stephen Finn has retired.
Yeah.
An Ashes winner, home and away. And he's also got a whole law named after him in the laws of cricket. So a very good career.
About the bails, right? Knocking the bails off in the delivery strike. Yeah. I didn't know that it's actually Finn's law.
Well, it's not called... I think people refer to it as Finn's law.
Right.
Yeah. But that's that was the reason why it was put in there.
Yeah. On his day, a brilliant test match bowler will always have that 10-11 tour, and those first 3 test matches took a lot of wickets in those first 3 games across that Ashes success. He had, as well as everybody knows, that 2015 return as well, which I think some doubted was ever going to happen after his nightmare tour in Australia 4 years after the 10-11 tour. So to have him come back in that Ashes series was rousing and great to see, because he's one of the game's really best people. I used to ghostwrite a column with him for an old magazine, so I got to know him a little bit. and he was always just delightful, really. Good crack, good sense of humour, humble and modest. And we'll be hearing a lot more from him, because he's a natural at the media game. It seems a little harsh to wonder if there was a little bit left over that he could have pulled off in his career. It feels a little bit harsh to look at it in those terms. I think when he's won an Ashes and in fact won 2 Ashes, or played a key part in winning 2 Ashes series. But nonetheless, with his physical components and his ability to bowl fast, I saw him take 9 for 30 against Worcester for Middlesex. And I just thought he was just going to take 400 Test wickets at least. He looked fabulous at the time. And then obviously life got in the way, injuries and technical issues. But on his day, he was a brilliant, brilliant fast bowler. And as I say, one of the nicest, most humane people you could meet in the game.
Yeah, I don't think it's harsh there at all, because I mean, it's just that
it's just when somebody goes in the same week and you say, "Oh, you should have done more," sounds a bit harsh.
Yeah, no, but I think it's just a mark of the talent that he did have, which was enormous, really. And it's easy to look at that career as a whole and go, it was pretty good. He was a pretty good bowler, and actually forget that. And even in one-day cricket, there was a time when he was one of the very best bowlers in the world at that. He was the fastest or the youngest to 50 Test wickets since Ian Botham, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Did stuff very young that you would look at and think, that is a guy who was going to be around for a long time. And even though for all he achieved, that's all it is saying that this was a bowler who had everything and still did loads, I guess, which is
I think as well, if you look at that 10-11 tour and the team that was in 10-11, there are so many like genuine greats of English cricket. And then you look at Finn, and he's the one that stands out as having not fulfilled, not through his fault or, just circumstance, having not fulfilled the wickets he could have got, the other achievements he could have got. And I think people will always look back on that career and go, out of that kind of era, that quota of players, that he was the one who could have gone on and achieved more. Not to say like what he didn't achieve in his career was fantastic, but there could have been more to come, I guess.
Phil?
Yeah.
There is a new magazine out this week. What's in it?
So on the front cover is Duckett and Crawley. We managed to get a photograph of those two in the chaos of the post-oval finish. On the outfield, it's a fabulous photo shoot that we managed to get, impromptu really, and we've stuck one on the front cover of the two of them. They're an odd couple in some respects, but they go really well together, and their opening partnership and this sort of no-holds-barred madness of it encapsulated the last couple of months really in Test cricket. And so we managed to get a joint interview with them, and so they carry the cover and they carry the post Ashes celebration really. In amongst that as well is a really good interview by Adam Patel, who's a very good young journalist who spoke to Usman Khawaja, and Khawaja took him through the 2 months of his own Ashes triumph as well. So we've got 3 of the 4 openers in there. We couldn't get Davey, unfortunately. And so there's an unashamedly celebratory feel to the whole thing. We throw it forward as well to Brisbane 2024-5, 2025-6 even. And we tantalise. And Joey writes a really nice piece about who he can imagine opening and cracking in for that Test match. Katya went round the grounds to cover the women's Ashes as well, so she delivers an excellent dispatch from that. Mel speaks to Kumar Sangakkara about Bazball and other balls, and he is suitably statesmanlike on the state of the game as well. He's particularly good on that. Doesn't pull any punches either. And as one of the key men, of course, of the MCC, World Cricket Committee, he's got a lot to say regarding the game's future. It's necessary stuff, essential stuff, really. And loads of other stuff, Alex Tudor and his dad, Joe spoke to the both of them about the Tudor's experience for his Procreation series, which is another masterpiece by Joe. And yeah, various bits and bobs. Ram Prakash on the dilemmas of when to retire. Andrew Miller bemoans the demise of the West Indies. Lawrence Booth wonders what Bazball means for the rest of the world going forward. Ollie Robinson pays tribute to Stuart Broad. I write a thing on Wokes and Wood as, the likely lad's done good. It's not one. Oh yeah, and in amongst it as well, there is a round table reflecting on the findings of the ICEC report, which of course was necessary and damning and humbling for a game that needs to confront its entrenched discrimination, if you like, and we got some interesting and valuable voices together, from Isha Guha to Adam Rutherford, to sit down and to debate it and discuss it. Zafar Ansari as well, who was actually one of the commissioners of the report, he agreed to talk to us about it as well. So it's not just celebratory. You can't do a monthly magazine without staring into the eyes of cricket as well, and so it's all in there, and it's out in a day or two. I think it's out on Thursday, but you can pre-order a course from wisden.com.
Yeah, this is a good one. I have to, as part of my job for the website, I have to pick out the quotes that we want social media graphics of. And I was going through the candidates Joe had chosen. I was like, how do I choose which one of these to not have? It's like choosing between children.
There you go.
But the best one is that Duckett is considering launching his own line of bucket hats, which will be Duckett hats. That's the big
scoop. Yeah. He's in a light bulb moment, he spoke to his girlfriend. Yeah. He was between test matches. And he says, yeah, like, let's do it. Spoke to his agent. It's all up and running. Watch this space. Literal quote. Watch this space. Would you rock a Duckett hat?
Yeah, given the right circumstances.
For your cheeky weekends away to Amsterdam, right?
Yeah,
you could definitely pull off a Duckett hat.
Yeah, definitely. Fit right in.
Yeah, well, that's
fair play to Katya as well, who pulled in the early hours and has rocked up here and
held the show together.
Yeah, well played.
Yeah,
all things considered.
Yeah.
Well done, Ben.
Thank you. That's we don't normally end with a round of well dones, but well done, Phil. And that is all we have time for this week. Thanks very much for listening. And if you did enjoy the show, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends about it too. Cheers.